Hi, Mr. Burke. How are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good too. Thank you so much. Do you mind if we ask you a few questions?
I would love it.
Okay. So where did you grow up? So tell us a little bit about your family.
Yeah, so I grew up here in Marin, right where we're filming. And it's a great place to grow up. As you can hear the bird in the background, actually. And it's wonderful. It's been wonderful. And I went to school here. And then I went to college down in Southern California, at University of Southern California.
Speaking of school, did you score high on your school test?
Well, interestingly enough, what's interesting is that I actually have ADD and I also have dyslexia, which is an interesting thing for entrepreneurs. A lot of entrepreneurs actually have some type of learning disability.
Like
not
Percy
everybody,
Jackson.
not all of them, but yeah. And so because, part of the entrepreneurial skill is you have to use different parts of your brain as well.
Right.
I'm not saying it's a requirement, of course, but school was a bit challenging for me as well. Reading when I was in even 4th, 5th, 6th, even in college, reading was a challenge for me. Now, I was able to get through it and I had to read a lot, just like all of you do as well, and consume a lot of information. And you get really good at it, but I struggled with it as well.
So this was one of your main, struggles.
Yeah, it was absolutely one of my main struggles. But, I worked really hard in school. I always thought I had to work harder than everybody else because I had a learning disability. But I think it actually made me a better entrepreneur today.
That's great.
So, yeah. So it all worked out good.
Did your parents support you or influence you to become an entrepreneur?
Yeah, absolutely. Interestingly enough, my father, I was about 8 or 9 years old. And just right on the other side of that hill is a town called Mill Valley. And in Mill Valley, he was going to buy a hardware store. And when I was growing up, we did a lot of work around the house and we did woodworking and metalwork and all this kind of stuff. So I got really used to kind of being in that environment. That was our hobby. That was what I did with my dad when we weren't playing sports or doing something else. And about 9 or 10, I was, he looked at buying a hardware store. And that was really exciting to me.
Store?
A hardware store.
Wow.
And I got the entrepreneurial, kind of excitement there. I really wanted him to do it. Really wanted him to do it. He didn't make the jump. He actually stayed at IBM for his entire career, 35 years, which in today's world, we don't do that anymore. But back then, you stayed at one company for your entire career. And he just couldn't, he didn't quite have it in him. But I think I got the entrepreneurial gene from him. But from that day forward, it kind of inspired me because I went right on to having paper routes. Now, I know that you may not know what that is. Okay. Paper routes in my day, we actually would go deliver papers door to door. And I didn't just have one route. I got one route when I was 10. What's that?
Like a newspaper boy, like delivering papers?
Yeah, well, you're delivering papers every day. They instead of having adults deliver them, they used to have kids deliver them.
Yeah.
Back in the day, you've probably seen that in some old TV show, right? So I did that. And I started with my first route when I was 10. And then I got a second route and a third route and then finally a fourth route. And I delivered papers up until I was 16. But I had to be responsible for everything. I had to collect money. I had to actually go out and sell subscriptions. And so I would go out a couple times a week and I would knock on people's doors. Would you like to subscribe? I won a bunch of awards, So those are my early entrepreneurial days. And so, maybe, as your audience out there, the people that are listening here, might be doing their own entrepreneurial thing, but just updated for the time. So that was, my time.
So what do you think was your greatest influence to become an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think certainly my father, no question, because I watched him all through business. And, just the desire in me I don't know where it came from. And I don't know that all entrepreneurs know where their desire comes from. It was the desire that I didn't want to work for anyone else. And I don't know why. I just didn't want to work for anyone else. It wasn't so much being bossed around or anything, but at an early age, I kind of knew that I just didn't want to be confined. And I wanted to explore my creativity. And entrepreneurism, as we'll probably talk about, is a highly creative thing.
Right.
So I just relished in anything I could do to start a business. Even when I was in college, I used to sell software, but I'd make it myself and then I'd sell it myself. This was when I was at USC as both undergrad and graduate. So it was always a business somewhere, right? That's kind of the spark of an entrepreneur that just you keep going and going and going.
There's a common myth about the entrepreneur that they start with no money, but I've heard that's true for you. And you started Market Live with only $500.
Yes, yeah. A lot of businesses actually just start with hard work, a great idea and hard work, right? And I don't even know if you need a great idea. It doesn't have to be a big, huge idea. I actually tell a lot of entrepreneurs, just start. start with what you're doing, and what it happens is it just starts to build and build and build, kind of like a snowball. It starts out really small. As you start running down the hill, as the snowball gets bigger and bigger and bigger, it actually gets momentum. And that's how businesses start really small and get really big, right? I mean, look at Amazon. Amazon is one of the biggest companies that we have today. You know, Jeff Bezos started selling books, and not a large number of books, a small number of books. And then it built and built, and now he sells everything under the sun, and everybody uses it. But there were many days, and I was in the early days of Amazon, meaning I lived through it, but I was also in the industry. I was in e-commerce. I owned an e-commerce company, and not selling things. I actually provided all the infrastructure for literally billions of dollars of e-commerce went through our system at Market Live, billions of dollars. And so I saw how Amazon grew. We were partnered with them for many of the years, and they were teeny, and then they got bigger and bigger. But a lot of people thought they would never survive because they were not making money for most of the time that they were in business. They just kept investing. But Jeff Bezos is brilliant, so he invested more and more and more, and it just happened. But it was a snowball. So however small your idea is, I say start. The most important thing, and I know I'm jumping ahead, but the most important thing is to take action. And that's kind of what I did. You take action step by step by step, and something small. I was just in an office no bigger than where we're sitting right now for a number of years. And then hired my first employee, got my first big break, and then it just kept going from there. So that's how it happens. There's no magic to it either. It just, you got to be there, you got to be participating, you got to be doing
the right mindset.
And the right mindset. Not everybody is meant to be an entrepreneur, by the way. You bring up a really good point. And we'll get to some of the traits in just a little bit, but not everybody should be an entrepreneur. You have to, there has to be something inside of you, what I call a burning desire. You have to really want to do something. You have to have a passion for something. And your passion can be explored in many different ways. Working for somebody or doing your passion in other industries are just fine. Not everybody is built to be an entrepreneur as well. And I always said, as an employer, I had about 250 employees at Market Live. And I always said, thank goodness that I had people that wanted to work for me and with me, because not everybody was designed. And I really did see it as I worked with my employees that they were really good employees. They were brilliant, but they would never want to actually take on maybe some of what they would perceive as the stress or the risk. But I loved it.
Have you always worked for yourself? Never?
I have worked for other companies as well, but most of my career was being an entrepreneur. I started my company right after graduate school from USC. So literally, it was probably a year after that. But I'd worked for a local hardware store, and when I was really young, when I was 16, and I worked college. I worked at newspapers as well, but not just delivering newspapers, but in college worked inside the office of newspapers, the LA Times,
you wrote...
the USA Today, and our local newspaper here in Marin.
Do you still write for the newspapers?
No. That was a long time ago. Newspapers are so outdated now. It's like nobody reads them anymore. But even
online.
Exactly, everything's online. But remember, I was in the generation right before online, unfortunately. So that so people did read newspapers. But even when I was working, I could see the industry kind of going down, and I'm like, I don't want to build my entire career in the newspaper industry.
So a little while ago, you mentioned that you need to be an entrepreneur. You just need to have an idea.
Yeah.
My friend and I, we were having a little bit of a debate whether idea is more important or money is more important to, create a business. So what's your opinion on it?
So I think there's actually two things that are really important, and then money's kind of the third thing, because money will come with good ideas and who you are, persistence, and your own ability. So I think the first thing is between your ears, right? Between your ears, which is your ability to kind of think as an entrepreneur, be comfortable in that world and in dealing with that. That's number one, I think. Most important is a mentality, right? Number two is a good idea. I think a good idea or a great idea both works, right? It doesn't have to be something earth-shattering. A lot of times when I'm coaching entrepreneurs, when I'm working with people, I say there's not a lot of new ideas, like new, ridiculously innovative ideas.
Right.
They're just kind of here to be a good entrepreneur. I think you take an idea and you start to mold it into something how you see it. You tweak it, you change it.
Your view of it.
Yeah, you add something different to it, as an example. And, there have been bookstores around forever, but Amazon did it a little differently. There have also been online stores on forever, but what makes Amazon successful? Not to keep using them as the example, right? The number one thing is Jeff Bezos knew more than anybody else: delivery. So now today you see Amazon trucks everywhere. So he went from the big problem in the e-commerce industry, which was you couldn't get your packages fast enough, so I can just go down to the store and buy something, right? And he took it to where literally I ordered a book 2 days ago for a friend, had it delivered the next morning. Literally, I was having lunch with her at 3 o'clock. I said, you need this book. I went and ordered it online. She had it at her doorstep at 10 a.m. the next morning.
Wow.
That's crazy. But he did that. That did not happen. It used to be, when you'd watched ads on TV, it used to be deliver in 6 to 8 weeks. And so in the early days, this goes back 20, 30 years, we used to have to wait like 6 to 8 weeks for, we place an order and then we, get it. Absolutely. So you see, so he didn't invent online e-commerce. Jeff Bezos didn't. He didn't invent bookstores.
He did it better.
He did it better, exactly. So a lot of entrepreneurial ideas are your take on it. It's your twist on it. It's like, I like that, but I want to do it this way, right? And there's many ways to take an idea and just change the distribution channel, change the pricing strategy, change whatever concept. I'll give you an example. DoorDash. We're all kind of familiar with DoorDash today, right? Okay, pizza delivery has been around forever. Chinese food delivery has been around forever. And it took a while, by the way, for Grubhub and DoorDash to take off, right? Because we had to train consumers that it was okay. Is it popular today?
Oh, very popular.
Yes, very right? Popular. And Uber Eats. We don't want to leave out Uber Eats, but we don't do DoorDash is much cooler, right? In your generation, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure.
So you mentioned that you had dyslexia. So that was one of your, main weaknesses.
I still have dyslexia, unfortunately.
Are there any other strengths or weaknesses you had, and what, how did the weaknesses stop you from?
For me personally, yeah. I think some of the strengths, I would say, maybe creativity. I think that's kind of an important strength. I don't think of myself as a creative person, but entrepreneurship is a very creative endeavor. And just my desire, I think, to grow personally.
Again, passion. And, you have to have that passion.
You got to have the passion. And why passion is important, if I kind of sat here like this with both of you and said, entrepreneurship is a very interesting endeavor and you both should try it.
Yeah.
You're not very inspired. But if I'm sitting here like this going, okay, now here's what we're going to do. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to get our business plan down, and we're going to get our target market, and we're going to get our product idea crystallized, and we're going to get a minimum viable product we call an MVP, and we're going to go do that. That's much more exciting. And so that's what you have to do as an entrepreneur. It's your job to be the visionary. So one of the traits of an entrepreneur, and I guess probably maybe one of my strengths, I don't like to talk about my strengths too much. I got a lot of weaknesses. We're going to go on forever for that, okay? We'll just list them all out. But I would say I love taking an idea and making it into something. So something that doesn't exist today, and this is what's kind of cool about entrepreneurship, something that doesn't exist, and then all of a sudden you put life into it, like you water it, you plant the seeds and then you water those seeds, and all of a sudden something grows out of
imagination into a reality.
Exactly. Literally, there's nothing before, and then all of a sudden you have something, and then you start to grow it and iterate until you have something that actually is kind of, you look back and you go, wow. We started, Market Live started, we were an e-commerce platform. So we did e-commerce for a lot of companies that you might even know today, right? And we started off with just, one transaction, and then 10 transactions, then 100 transactions.
And it kept growing and growing.
And it grew into $2 billion a year of transactions, right? So by the time we had grown the company, we were doing $2 billion. I would always think about, we started with one server, and it used to go down all the time. Like it would crash all the time. Back in the early days of the internet, back in when the internet just first started, which is when I started.
Big, bulky computers.
You would have big, bulky computers, and they would go down a lot. So we would, it's like, it was down for 3 hours or 5 hours or 10 hours.
The Wi-Fi to pop up.
Yeah, or something like that. Well, even if we had Wi-Fi. We don't even think we used Wi-Fi back then. But the point is that I went from one computer to literally thousands and thousands of computers in Amazon's data center, which is where my company put all of their computers. We were in their data center, and we had literally thousands and thousands of instances of our sites running throughout the world. But it started with one little itty bitty server sitting in a corner where I used to have to dust it off and pray that it didn't go down every night, to literally a massive infrastructure with $2 billion of transactions going through. It's pretty cool, huh?
It is.
Yeah. But it does. But it starts with a lot of work, and just it's iterating until you build it up, right?
So you mentioned the early days. So what were the entrepreneurial trends back then versus now?
Yeah. So I think the difference back then versus today, it was probably easier to start a business back then. When I say back then, maybe 20 years ago, which seems like an eternity for your audience, right? It's like, well, I wasn't even born back then. It was probably a little bit easier back then. But I will tell you, in certain parts of the U.S. has always been very entrepreneurial in its mentality. And there are certain parts of the country that are even more entrepreneurial. California, New York, it's Chicago, Texas, and you're seeing Seattle, you're seeing these places pop up and being very, very entrepreneurial, right? So I think the environment that you're in has something to do with it as well. Don't worry, if you don't live in one of those areas, there's a way to bring that to your community. But also, I will say, even the world. So we're not just talking to a U.S. audience here. We're talking to a worldwide audience. And I got to say that the world has become much more entrepreneurial, even in the last 10 years, than it's ever been before.
You said that it's easier to become an entrepreneur like back then, but don't we have more tools and technology now?
Yes. So I think it was easier back then because the barriers were a little bit lower. I think now I would say in some ways it's a little harder, in some ways it's easier. I think your point is really, really good. We have a lot of tools and technique. The environment now, in terms of I think what's different today is the millennial generation, and even the generation you're in now, Generation Z, is much more entrepreneurial. In fact, a lot of stats that I've read says that the majority of people want to be entrepreneurs in the Gen Z and millennial generation, much different than when I was growing up. It was a kind of an interesting career path to be an entrepreneur. Now it's kind of like everybody wants to do it. So thank goodness, that's great for all of us, right? So I think it's harder in some ways because there's a lot more competition. There's a lot, it's like we got to come up with the next greatest idea, but there's also a lot of innovation going on out there. So it's kind of a mix of good and bad.
Right. How is your take on how important technological advancements, development of AI and computer sciences will affect entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I think, as you said, I think it gives them more opportunities. And I don't think that, I want to make sure that we don't just focus on technology, because I work with a lot of technology companies. I love technology, but also I work with other companies as well. And there are a lot of success stories. If you want to be an entrepreneur, or somebody in your audience wants to be an entrepreneur, it doesn't have to be necessarily technology as well. But so I think that it's just bringing innovation. It's bringing the next thing to the world and what you want to bring to the world. And what your job is to be the visionary around that and create something just enough new that the world looks at it and goes, oh, that's really interesting, right? So do I think that there are a lot of advancements in terms of technology and other things happening? Yes, the world is very vibrant with bringing new ideas, and we're much more used to and much more adapted to it. It was a little bit odd again to be an entrepreneur back when I started, but now it's kind of normal, right?
Yeah, they used to work for people, but starting in your own thing.
Yeah, much more accepting of it as well.
So what are you doing right now?
Yes, so I have a couple of businesses going. What I did is I sold my Market Live business about 3 years ago, and I miss it, right? But I sold it, and that's the dream of an entrepreneur, is to sell his or her company one hopes for a lot of money, and it did very well, and it was very successful, and I loved it. I loved working mainly with all the employees, and I love the fact that I have people now, of the 250 that people that worked for Market Live, but also the thousands of people we hired over 21 years and building those relationships. But now I see those people being CEOs of companies. I see them being vice presidents. I see them growing in their career, working in big companies like Amazon and others. And that's what means a lot to me in terms of that. So what am I doing now? I didn't answer your question. What am I doing now? I've got a couple of companies. One is I'm working on a software company now to help visionaries and thought leaders bring their ideas kind of to fruition. And I also work with entrepreneurs, and I do a lot of e-learning and a lot of live classes, and really teaching entrepreneurs how to be this generation, your generation, and I would say the millennial generation as well, and even beyond that, whatever that other generation is, older folks as well, on how to run their businesses. So that's what I'm doing now, and that's kind of my passion now is around that.
You said your father greatly influenced you. What do you think parents can do to help their children become bigger, succeed?
I think the other thing parents can do to encourage their kids is give them the freedom to actually grow and be creative. I think that anything that they can do to inspire that creativity in their kids, and kind of work with them and point things out and be excited about their ideas. Unfortunately, a lot of entrepreneurial ideas, a lot of entrepreneurs, when they start sharing their ideas with people, a lot of people do this. They're like, that's not a great idea. Have you heard that before? Yeah, and maybe your parents wouldn't do that, but maybe they would. They're like, oh, honey, you stay over here and just stay in school. Don't be an entrepreneur, right? If you have the desire, you're going to be an entrepreneur. It doesn't matter what anybody says. But but when you have an idea, when you have that idea and you're like, whatever age you are, and you say, I really want to do this, I recommend a couple of things. One is I recommend you share that idea a lot, often and early, because by sharing that idea, you'll get feedback. And I suggest that you actually take the feedback that resonates with you, that makes sense to you, and then you delete all the feedback of people that say, that's not a really good idea, or that doesn't work, or what have you. Because you have to make sure that the person you're communicating your idea to is actually your target market. Now, I know,
you're doing the right thing for the right person.
For the right person. So if I shared my idea of technology with my mom would be like, okay, I don't get it. Right? What? I mean, she just, she's older and she just doesn't understand technology. I don't think she ever understood what my company really did. And that's okay. That was okay. She's very supportive, but it's like, what do you do? And so she was very encouraging, but there are people out there that are not so encouraging. So I advise the entrepreneur to actually share their idea with a lot of people, but filter that feedback to what resonates with them, and take feedback that might be negative and say, you know what, that was a really good point. I need to do something about that. But make sure you talk to your target market.
Previously, you said that you were teaching entrepreneurs how to grow their businesses in your company, entrepreneurial.com. So what are the qualities that you think an entrepreneur should have? Yeah,
I think it's a great question, because, having those qualities that really propel you, because like I said before, not everybody should be an entrepreneur. So number one, I think, is vision. An entrepreneur has vision. They can see something that somebody else couldn't see, right? Elon Musk, as an example, at Tesla, right? He saw something in the electric car. They're not a car company. They're a power company. They're a battery company, right? Or a power company. But that's his genius, right? And he saw something that others didn't see. And so he had a vision. And what I always tell entrepreneurs to do, and it's going to sound a little strange, you want to point up here. You want to make it big. Point for the stars, right? Because even if you point for the stars, right, and you hit a little bit lower, right, that's still okay. When you say point for the stars, you may hit the moon, right? That's a quote that I actually recently read. And so that's okay. That's why you want to have a big vision when you're starting and being an entrepreneur, because that vision will start to make other people around your idea really excited about your idea, because that's what really makes an entrepreneur, drives an entrepreneur, is they're sharing their idea with other people, and other people get excited, because you can't do it all by yourself. You got to have an army around you of people really helping you. So I think that's number one. Number two is, I think, be fearless. And I know that's easier said than done, but fear is the one thing that stops us. And the difference between what makes a successful entrepreneur and that makes somebody that is probably not going to be so successful, or maybe even what we'll say fail. I don't think anybody fails in the entrepreneurial world at all. I don't think anybody fails at all, because we learn lessons from it. But you have to be you have to be fearless. You have to say, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and do this, and I'm going to give it my all, and I'm going to adjust as I go along. You take action. So the difference between what makes a successful entrepreneur and somebody that's not so successful is they take action. They take continuous action at their idea, and they just keep going and going and going. I think one of the most important things for an entrepreneur to do is persistence. I ran Market Live for 21 years. I started it from nothing, 21 years, until I sold it. And it was a great journey. And we had bumps all along the way. We had the economy blew up a couple of times, right? Where the economy just went, and here I am holding the bag and going, well, what do I do in a company that was relatively small? A couple hundred employees, 250 our max size, right? So you have to be able to kind of withstand all of those things that will come at you, right? So you do have to be fearless, and you have to be tenacious and persistent. So persistence, I say, if you're in the game, if you're playing a baseball game and you're on the field and you're playing, then you can make the play, right? Then you can have that home run, or that triple, or you're out there and make that amazing catch. If you're not in the game, you can't play. I know that sounds very obvious, but I do see a lot of entrepreneurs kind of take 2 steps forward and 1 step back.
Yeah.
That's kind of okay. If you take 1 step forward and 2 steps back, that's a problem, because then you're out of the game. That makes sense? Okay, good.
What is your favorite part about being an entrepreneur?
Well, creativity, for sure. That's number one. And creating something out of nothing, and then the most important thing, watching it grow. I am a really big believer. I think my entire life has really been around growth, and my own personal growth, because the entrepreneur world, being an entrepreneur will challenge you. It will challenge you to grow more than you've ever grown before, at least in business and other things, right? There are a lot of things that will challenge you for growth, but that's one of them, because you really, it's not easy. It's not easy. So that's a good thing. So number one is really getting challenged for growth. I think that's the most important thing for me, and I love being, it's just in that environment where growth is occurring.
So what do you think the future holds for people that want to become entrepreneurs versus the people that want to work in another company? Who do you think will succeed in the future?
Well, I think anybody can succeed. So I think that you can be extremely successful working for somebody else in a company and continuing to kind of live your passion, whether you want to be a lawyer and you want to work at a law firm, or maybe you want to be a lawyer and work on your own. Those are two paths that are both they're both entrepreneurial in nature. One is more working for another company and letting that company kind of help you rise up and become better. And you'll have lots of challenges there and lots of successes there. In addition, being a lawyer on your own has a whole different set of challenges and exciting things to do.
As we progress in time, do you think we'll see more people working as entrepreneurs or more people working in companies?
Yeah, I do. I very much believe that we're going to see a lot more entrepreneurs than we've ever seen before. The mentality of the millennial generation and Gen Z is all about kind of doing things for themselves and making it happen for themselves, being creative. So the world is really open now to this entrepreneur kind of thing that really was just a hard word to spell like 20 years ago. And a lot of people still can't spell it, by the way. But today, it's a lot easier to be an entrepreneur. There's a lot more support as well for funding, for advice, for counseling. There's a lot more infrastructure out there for that.
Right.
So in that regard, I think, again, like I said, it's a little bit harder in some regards because there's a lot more people wanting to be entrepreneurs, and it's a lot easier because there's a lot more resources, as you pointed out, very, very well. Yeah.
So would you be willing to help young entrepreneurs like us start our own businesses?
Absolutely. Yeah. My passion is to be able to help entrepreneurs, young and old, it doesn't matter. That's my mission in life. That's really what I want to do. And actually I do that through a company called MoonshotJr, which is targeted specifically at young entrepreneurs like yourself that really does help bring them along. So that's one of my vehicles for being able to communicate to folks in your generation.
So thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely.
For all the questions
Thank
we
you.
had. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
It was great learning about your life and your business and how you grew it.
Yeah, and it was really great meeting.
Oh, it was great meeting you too. Guys, good luck, okay?
Thank you.
Hey guys!
I'm Sania.
And I'm Samvi.
And if you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe, and comment down below what videos you want us to do next.
And for more content information, visit www.moonshotjr.com.